Welcome back to yet another episode of your Re-Educated podcast. Today, we have an extremely special guest. Her name is Fabia Postel. When I was traveling through India, I took a 2-week break from teaching and working in Mumbai, and I stayed with her, and I was fascinated by her worldview, her views on cultural appropriation and understanding cultural sensitivity. She is an Airbnb host and travel guide and has helped thousands of people travel through Mumbai and has such an interesting worldview. And I'm really excited to dive into that today. How are you?
Gautam, so nice to speak to you again.
Yeah.
Feels like you're back here, like in the same room, which is really nice.
Yeah. You're staying in the room that I was sleeping in. No.
Yeah, I'm sitting in the guest room here. This is your room, so
Yeah.
you should plan your next trip back to your room.
I love that house, and I honestly miss it. Just the view of the entire skyline from outside. I mean, it's a beautiful place. How did you first get into Airbnb?
Okay, so like you're saying, yeah, I think the best thing about Airbnb is that you get to share so much. Your space, everything, time, meals, food, and that's why it's so special with you as well because we got to share so much and conversations. But Airbnb is a funny story. Actually, I was studying in the UK. I decided to study media and culture studies,
Oh, cool.
and yeah, so my room was empty at home. So my parents actually divorced when I was 15, and my mom moved out and she got this place which was just big enough. I thought was just big enough for both of us. So when I left to study in the UK, a friend of hers actually gave her a surprise gift on her 50th birthday and signed her up on Airbnb. And she had no clue like what it was or how it worked. But then her friend just thought like it was the best thing that she could do because the room was empty and I was gone and she thought, why should she be alone? Like she's so good at being with people. So that's when she put up some ordinary pictures of the room. And before you know it, there were people from all over the world coming to stay, and mom was hosting them. And when I came back from England, my room was somebody else's. It was a Japanese person's room, and it was a British person's room, and a Greek person's room. And at first, I would say I was kind of hesitant because strangely I had this really bad experience in London with a flatmate. So we decided she was a classmate and we decided to move in together. And one day she stopped paying the rent. And then I got freaked out because I thought we are going to get chucked out and there were like lots of issues there. So after that, it was really difficult to trust a stranger, like especially to live with somebody who you don't know. I think that was like a trauma. So I lived alone in London for a year. And when I came back and I saw mom was hosting or living with all these strangers, every day, uh, I was like, Mom, this is not a good idea. Like, what are you doing? But she was so positive about it. And so I think I didn't have much of a choice. And I ended up sharing the room with my mom and then meeting all these people. And I think the most beautiful thing I realized was that strangers are not always danger. So actually, if something happens to you, if you're out on the street or wherever you're, if you're in an accident, actually, it's actually a stranger who's going to come and help you first because most of the people who are around you all the time, you don't know them. And that's not a negative thing. It's you don't have to think of it as negative. So once when mom went off to San Francisco for the Airbnb open, I was alone at home for one night and I couldn't sleep. I was just I felt so insecure. And the next day, these guests booked 2 guys from I think Australia, and then I was so happy. Like I was sleeping, I slept well because there were strangers in my house. So I was like, that's so cool. Like actually, I feel safe with strangers. I'm not alone. And then I just started really loving it, and um, yeah, and then even sharing the space with my mom in the room, that became so special because it's not about physical space. I think it's a space between people that you create, and you should be closer. We're creating space between each other, but actually we should just be closer to each other.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like how you relate to strangers changes the way you travel the world. I mean, I that was a huge change for me where when I first started traveling, I was very afraid of like, oh my God, what if this person steals this? What if, which is not to say that that doesn't exist, but it's to say that more often than not, I have found strangers to be so helpful than strangers that have like tried to obstruct me in any way. And so once you change that, all of a sudden you start seeing the people around you as possible friendships, possible relationships, as opposed to everyone being a possible enemy. And so one question I have for you is you've been, one of the first people on Airbnb in India, right? I mean, within the first few years of conception, when did you guys get on Airbnb?
So it was back in 2011.
Yeah, wow.
And that was, yeah, when mom was turning 50. So it was the friend who gave her, signed her up. It was her 50th birthday gift.
Hmm. It's been a long time. Yeah, so that's almost like 12 to 13 years of hosting.
Yeah.
And over that period of time, it must have been hundreds and hundreds of guests.
Hundreds, and I think now we're almost at 500. But I
Wow.
think it's been more. We have almost 500 reviews, but I think it's we've had much more guests than that.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. And so, what I'm really curious about is it's a very unique way of traveling the world that you get to experience, right? I just remember having that one conversation where your mom had kind of brought up, like, regardless of spending enormous amount of times in all these countries, you're spending enormous amount of times with the people from all over the world who then spend considerable time with you, share their lives, share their stories and experiences. It's such a unique way of learning about the world. What are some of your favorite memories, or what are some of the coolest things you've learned about just what's happening?
Um, yeah, I think you're right. It's like definitely one of the most special things in my life that you have all these people you don't know coming into your shared space. And the thing is, what I realize is you can open up so much. Sometimes you can open up more to somebody you don't know than somebody who's
Mm.
so close to you. And you can talk about just like how we did, like, like the moment you came in, like we were at the window and we were having this deep conversation about cultural sensitivity and talking about all our experiences. And I think that's what's so special that to make somebody also feel at home in your home. And so they feel so open to sharing about their opinions, stories, sharing food, and I have so many stories now that are so memorable with people from all over. I don't know, should I tell you some of
Yeah, I
them?
would love to hear a few. Yeah, tell me a few.
Okay. So there was a couple from the US. I'm not sure where in the US, but it was an African American couple. And they booked to stay, but they didn't really tell us why they were coming to stay. But I felt like it wasn't a holiday, because it was quite a long. They booked, I think, almost for 2 weeks. And the man's wife was coming earlier than him, and she actually didn't. She forgot to mention she was coming at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So she didn't book the night before. So suddenly she turned up at our house at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we already had a guest staying in the room. And then she ended up sleeping on the sofa because we're like, okay, we can't just, say no. So she stayed on the sofa. And then in the morning, we got talking. And then because we were just sitting on the sofa having tea together, and then she said, I said, nobody comes for 2 weeks to Mumbai. Everyone's quite scared to stay in Mumbai for long. And she said they were coming for surrogacy. So her husband, who was arriving the next day, they were coming for surrogate treatment in India. And this is back when surrogacy was legal. So um, they were doing all the treatments and they stayed with us. And their dream was to have a child. And the strange thing was that they were from two different religions, the husband and wife. So their parents were against their relationship. So the parents kind of use that, like, you can't have a child because we told you, like, you're from two different religions.
Hmm.
And they came here and um, they went through the procedure and they was like we just bonded so well. Like one day the husband came back from all these treatments. He was so tired, and I opened the door, and he's just lying on the ground in the middle of the hall, like with his arms wide open. And I felt so good. I was like, I'm so happy. Like he feels comfortable here. He feels like nobody's judging him. Like
Mm.
for whatever reason he's here. Nobody's totally open. And then 9 months later, uh, unfortunately, we were booked at that time, but they stayed somewhere close by. And they came to our house with a little baby,
Aw.
which they came to collect. And they called her Oma Lola.
Hmm.
And also strange thing, what happened was, I think exactly after they had Oma Lola, and the husband, he was actually counting every single dollar of his for this treatment. So you just saw like he had saved up all his earnings, for this little child, to have this child, which was so cute. And a year later, surrogacy was banned for foreigners. And he called us from the US and he said, we really want another child. Omalola's growing up and she needs like a little brother or sister. And but now what do we do, right? And the embryos or whatever it is are stuck in India. So he said, can you please go online and make some kind of payments and make the arrangements for the embryos to be sent to um, somewhere in the Eastern European country. Not sure. I think Georgia. I think it was Georgia. So we did the arrangements, and then it actually got sent off to Georgia, and they had their second little surrogate baby born in
Wow.
Georgia. Uh,
That's such an intimate way to get to know somebody. I mean, the fact that you entered that entire, what basically happened is someone's universe just opened up and then you step into it and you understand what's happening in this one, two people's lives. And then you do
yeah,
that time and time and time again because of what you
yeah,
said, the space that you guys create in your house is so open that people can feel vulnerable and really themselves in
yeah.
that place. And so because of that, you get to not just meet people at face value of just like, okay, this is who you are, but you get to connect with them in a
Yeah.
much more intimate way.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, not everybody travels to travel outwardly. They're also traveling inwardly, and they're moving to look within themselves. So I think meeting them, the first thing you have to do with the traveler is to understand them. What are they searching for? Are they searching to explore,
Mm.
or are they coming to explore something within them, spiritual, or just sometimes they're not coming to look out. They're coming to look in, and they just want to share their stories. And they, like I said, it's you can open up to somebody you've never met before because they're not going to judge you. They're not going to have any
Mm.
opinions.
Wow. And so, I mean, this is an education podcast. So I feel like there's so many implications of what you do and things that can be translated over into a classroom. And I mean, this concept of having an open space where people can feel like they can be and belong, very unjudged, is something that is a very powerful feeling that I was blessed to have felt in your house. So one thing I'm curious is, what are some of the things that you think that you're doing or that you have done in the space that allows that to happen?
I think the first thing is firstly, just being totally genuine. So, I think being hospitable and being genuine um, go hand in hand. And it's like, it is, if I'm having a bad day, which I have bad days, of course, but I'm getting up and I'm smiling at my guests and I'm having, let's have some tea together. I think people misunderstand that hospitality means you always have to have this happy face on and you need to like, but it's not that. I think the more genuine come, let's have a tea. Let me tell you about how terrible my day was yesterday. I'm
Mm.
just a normal person living my, just like you. I have bad days and I have good days. And so the good thing is that we get to like share about it. And I value people's opinions so much that like, yeah, it's amazing. Today, actually, I had a guest who was 80 years old, a dancer from Australia.
Wow.
And I just wanted to ask him so many, like, yeah, I wanted to ask him so many things about my life, like, because he's so experienced and he's traveled all over the world and he's met so many people. He's taught so many people. So I was like, I just want to tell him about all these personal things in my life because I value what he can, share with me. Um, I think that's what's so special.
Hmm. I mean, it's truly it's magnificent. I mean, on average, I mean, I came back to the States, and
Mhm.
on average, the number of people I meet who have seen something vastly different, even though I live in the Bay Area and I'm around a lot of immigrants and people who have come from all over the world, one thing I don't see is people don't often share their stories. Like, it was only after I had gone to India was I able to even start asking my dad questions of like, what was your childhood like? Like, explain. I want to imagine what it was like to be in your shoes. I think oftentimes what I see is a lot of people don't really share their background. They're just like, that's something in the past, and it's not really brought to the table. But it impacts people. So for you to say, this 80-year-old dancer, it was very from Australia. It's evident that those things played a huge role in shaping that person for who they are.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that happens as you get older. There's a longer and longer backstory that people don't know of, right? I mean, anyone just who they are presenting themselves to be at that moment, but that entire story that happened before, it could have been anything, right? And it's that fascination is something that makes every interaction with the person a learning opportunity. And I think you really foster that. And so where does that curiosity come for you, and how do you sustain it over so long?
I think also like what you just said, I think our home, once you open your home and you actually open your heart to everyone and anyone without being critical or judgmental, is that it's home to everybody and everyone can feel comfortable there, just like comfortable with you. Anybody can feel comfortable with you. So it's not just like you said, it's not just our guests or Airbnb guests who come in and feel like they can open up. Of it's also like it's the gas man who comes to deliver our gas.
Hmm.
It's somebody who comes to deliver some food at our home. It's the guys who come to fix our air conditioners. So they should. Our philosophy is to make everybody who comes into the home feel that they are at home. So it's just sharing something to drink or making them feel comfortable in that space. Because I think, yeah, the most important thing is to feel comfortable in someone's presence and space. And then you can feel so free and feel loved.
Hmm. Yeah, because I want to write this down, because for me, and a lot of people I know in the US, hospitality is very different culture to culture. But I have always found Indian hospitality to be some of the most powerful and loving that I've ever felt in my life. But I think you also brought up a very good distinction of the genuineness that is really key. Because what I also see is a lot of people who don't present that end up building resentment over a longer period of time if they are hosting someone. And so it is only by being genuine does that resentment not add up over time. And so my question for you is, what are some of the small, because for you it may be things that you're just doing subconsciously, but the your cultural hospitality is very different than what someone perhaps in the US would be used to, or what someone would take for granted. And so what are some of the things that make hospitality for you?
Okay, so I have to think about going to somebody else's house who made me feel so at home, almost more at home than my own home. And
Mm.
so I could reflect on that. And that was somebody who works here in Mumbai in the Indonesian consulate. So we got friendly with him, and he said, "Why don't you come over and meet my family for an Indonesian meal?" Because we said, "Oh, we love Indonesian food." And when I went into that home, I just felt like it doesn't have to be the food doesn't have to be served in the best of dishes, or you don't have to clean up the home to make it look very presentable or have the best stuff out. It's actually just sharing whatever you have. So you don't have to share the best of something. You just have to share whatever you can give to someone. And that's like, even if it's just time, if somebody doesn't have much to share, but they have time and love and just to listen to someone, I think that's the most important thing. But yes, I definitely think I have learned from other Indians to love and be more hospitable because after becoming a tour guide and walking through sometimes these little tiny little streets where people's homes are the size of my guest room, like, and they have been so, like, it's made us feel like crying because their home does not feel small at all. In fact, it feels super big because their hearts are so big. And they're like, come in and have chai. Like I said, just share whatever they are having and make you feel so loved, even though uh, they've not known you. Like, I think I've definitely also learned from local Indians how to be more hospitable.
Yeah. You bring up this concept of sharing, and it's something that I've always found myself to have had a hard time with, because I think when I really reflect on myself, every time I do share, unless it's with a very few select people, and I guess to me, that's how I know I love someone, when there's like no ego talking in the back of my head of like, oh my God, but if you share, will you have enough for yourself? And when I really love the people in my life, then I share absolutely freely. What is one thing you do to practice that art? Because I do want to get there eventually. I want to get to that place where I'm where I feel full enough, where I'm willing to share everything that is mine. What are some things you think that you have to kind of practice to get to that point? Or what are things you tell yourself? How do you philosophically get to a point where you are able to share without fear that you won't have enough?
I think the thing is that when you share, it's never going to be, there's never going to be less of anything. There's actually going to be more because um, there's more love, there's more um, interaction, there's more inclusivity. So how can there ever be less? Um, if you're sharing something, um, sorry, should I repeat that? Look,
I can hear
this is
you.
the
Oh,
problem.
it's a
Okay.
kitty.
It's climbing. They have to disturb you. Like cats will just always come onto the books or onto the laptop when they're around.
They just want to be included.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, in the practice of genuineness, I feel like
Yeah.
keeping the cat intrusion into the conversation is part, right? I mean, it's making me think a lot about, okay, in what areas of my life am I not genuine? And the art of podcasting itself, I think, is an ingenuine act. I mean, in many ways, it's you got to you got to talk a certain way, present a certain way, edit out these parts, and I think perhaps maybe that's one place in my life where I can strive for more genuineness. So yeah, why not leave the cat intrusion in? But yeah, what were you saying? I was very
Okay.
curious to hear what you were saying about sharing.
Um, yeah, like I said, I think it's how can there ever be less when you're sharing something? There's always more.
Mm,
Mm. And I've definitely, like you said, learned that from local Indians who actually you think they have less than me, and yet they are never fearful of sharing whatever they have. So how can I ever be fearful of having less, um, you know, from
wow.
sharing?
Yeah, I think that can be powerful when you see someone who you think has less than you, but share more. Then all of a sudden you're like, then what is stopping me? It's only when
Yeah, like
you
I've
kind of
seen.
continue. Yeah, what?
Yeah, no, like what you remind me that I've seen people who are sleeping on the pavements in Mumbai, and yet when they get like they're eating a piece of fish or something, they will always, I've seen it, take a little piece and give it to the little cat, street cat, stray cat.
Mm,
And if you see that, how can you not, like you said, how can you not learn from that and love that?
yeah. I guess one thing I'm trying to think of is the other element of this. is the only way to truly share is without expecting something in return, where it's like, okay, I'm going to share this with you, but you need to return something back to me in the future, or kind of like having a tally in your head where like, okay, I shared 6 things with them, they never got it back. How do you do that while still maintaining some semblance of fear for being taken advantage of? Like, is it possible to do both? Do you ever kind of have that in your mind where it's like, how do you know when you're being taken advantage of versus when you're just sharing lovingly?
Oh, such a good question, Gautam. Oh, I have to think about it. It's an amazing question. Okay. Yeah, I think it's so strange because I've actually been thinking about this very thing the last 3 days. I've racked my head over it. I think there's no question of being taken advantage of. Because as long as you're doing it for good, I think like in India, especially because we have this we're very spiritual, and whatever you give, um, it's not about what you get back. You just have to think about you're doing something good by giving. So even if you put water out on your terrace for the pigeons, and they're coming and taking their bath there every day, and very happily drinking their water, are they giving? Would you ever say that they're taking advantage of you or anything that you're giving them? No. So why do we feel that with other people? We just have to put the water out there, and they have to come and they have to take their bath and drink their water. It's the same thing. Why should we feel like we would never think that about a cat or a pet? So why do we feel that with humans? I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough one. It really depends on the experiences that you've had, and for me, a lot of what other people have told me, right? I mean, if I had to purely go from my own experience of humans, I've had a pretty great experience with people. But I think a lot of the fear literally comes from movies, from I don't even know where they come from news articles that that focus on a very specific type of world event. Like they're not, a lot of these news articles aren't covering all the great acts of humanity that happen thousands of times every day, right? I mean, they cover all the examples or something terrible is happening. And so I'm just trying to think, I was like, if I erased all of that, only looked at my experiences, for the majority, people haven't taken advantage of me. And it's hard to know whether that's just luck or whether is it just happen chance, that's the case, or is that for everybody? Because it is really different for people.
That's true. Yeah, I think not related to that, but we had Israeli guests, like our first Israeli guests were about, I think, 6 years ago. And when we got the request, I think I was scared. So I thought, maybe they're not gonna like me because they haven't seen my photo. They've seen mom's photo, and I wear a scarf, and maybe they don't know that we're Muslims or something. So I was scared, and I was like really hesitant. But then when I opened the door, I just smiled. I was like, okay, just be yourself, like how you are with everyone else. And actually, we turned out to be such good friends. We spent like all the 3 days out together in the city exploring. And then I realized that, the worst thing you can think is that people from a certain place, people from a certain, religion or their beliefs, you cannot generalize. And we actually went to Israel to stay in their house like a few years later. Yeah. And they took us to all the Muslim sites, that we wanted to see, like
that's really sweet.
The Palestinian side. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is really the moral of the story, and in connecting to education, of like, sometimes what education feels like is it doesn't allow you to actually explore and learn on your own. It kind of says, this is what the world is like, boom. Like, a lot of history can be learned through just living. I mean, you can just simply by talking to people, instead of having to read a book to learn about the US history, go talk to a veteran, go talk, understand your own concept of history by talking to many different sources. Build it yourself. You don't have to just take what it says on a few textbooks. It's one source, but not the only source. And I think that's a phenomenal point. So I want to get into, I think, the thing I think that's so critical and something I was really sad to see throughout a lot of my travels, which is cultural sensitivity. And I want to define that word and I want to define that concept. And I'm very excited to hear, because you've worked with so many people from around the world, you must have seen a clear difference between people who traveled with India with an open mind, trying to understand and learn about a culture that's different than theirs, versus people who are traveling with like, oh my God, this is so gross. This is so bad. Like, why would someone live like this? My life, I'm so glad I live in my world, right? I mean, there's a clear difference between those two, and you can tell immediately from how they talk to people, how they walk, how they look. I mean, how they, everything. And so the first question is cultural sensitivity. In your tour guide experiences and everything, what have you noticed to be the biggest difference between those who you would consider to be culturally sensitive versus those who aren't?
I think the first thing would be people who have stereotypes or any preconceived ideas about a place and people. So if they come, um, oh, in opposed to people who come and make their own observations of who they meet and what they see and what they feel in that place, instead of uh, coming and thinking that I've seen this, I've heard that, these people are like this, those people are like that, those kind of preconceived ideas and no generalizations. So we had a guest from Kenya recently, and I was so, like, it was just amazing to be spend time with him out in the city and places that I go to every day. But they were so much more special when I was going with him because he was so, like I said, open minded, non judgmental, not critical at all. I think that's so important, and respectful. So it might not be your culture. You might not eat those things or in that way or live like that or wear those kind of clothes. Um, but the most important thing is to, instead of saying, oh, how weird, you just think, oh, how different. And what can I
Mm,
learn from this culture? There's
mm.
something positive in every culture. So I think it's what you see. So those people who are not culturally sensitive, they'll come and they'll see these, people in India, in Mumbai live in small homes. The first thing they'll see is a small home, and they'll think, oh, but how do five people fit in here? How are they comfortable? Like they, they're comparing their life with with the people who they see, and I think it's not about comparisons. You're not traveling to make comparisons. You're traveling to make observations and um, and somebody whose culture is sensitive will not see the small home. They'll just say, "Oh wow, like they're preparing fresh food here, fresh vegetables, and they're cooking, you know, every day." And that's the amazing thing about this country, like not to see the negatives um,
Yeah.
first. And what can we learn from this? There's something to learn from everyone. So uh, something we have to learn from these people who live in these houses. They're so hospitable, like you said.
It's what you were talking about earlier, where it's this, even with talking to people, right? When you have that open mind of what can I learn from this person, all of a sudden all those other stereotypes and preconceived notions go out the window because now they're an open book. Anything can happen from this conversation. So strangers start to become a tool of wisdom, no longer just like, oh my God, I'm so afraid of them. They have a lot of utility to offer you, even if you're looking at it from that perspective. And I think that's so similar. Yeah, I think what you're saying is so profound that most people I see who travel do not travel like that. Like, it may seem like, yeah, it's common sense, but most people I know do not travel at all like that. It's, and I was shocked in India, the number of people who would pick up a child and take a picture with them. And it would happen in both directions, right? I mean, I saw also at the same time, many Indians go up to white tourists and would be like, can we get a picture? Can we, and, it'd be so overwhelming that it was quite unreasonable from both directions, right? Where you weren't really seeing the other person for being a human. I think sometimes they were kind of just like this alien to be used for your own good in some way or another. It wasn't like a real person. And I think the amount that happens, especially through tourism, in the name of tourism, is really sad.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Gautam, but I think there's a little difference there. Like I wanted to mention this actually, don't like about people not just taking pictures of people, but taking pictures with people. And that's something like so different because you make a person feel so different when you're behind the camera and taking just a picture of them in opposed to like taking it with them. And I think that's the thing when if foreigners come to India, the Indians want to take pictures with them most of the time. They ask, let's get a picture together, and they'll show their family back home. And I do get upset when travelers take pictures of people here. And I always say, like, you go along, make them feel included, that you're with them, not you're
Hmm.
just taking this observation, like, because the first photographs that were ever, like some of the first photographs that were ever taken were, that's how actually travel started in some ways, that um, they would take pictures of others, they were called others, and they would compare the size of the head and the size of the body and how tall, and everything was in measurements, and, it's kind of ethnographic photos of people to show how
Hmm.
other they are in another country. And I think that's so different when you take a picture with someone, that we're not so different at all, actually.
Hmm. Wow, that's a very particular difference that I would not have identified. That's really cool that you've been able to. So, what are some other things like that? What are some other things that people may do thinking that it's totally fine, but you've, in your experience, taken to be, wow, that was quite insensitive?
Insensitive. Insensitive. Let me see. I think sometimes being physically close to someone, they might. So in India, because there's, especially in Mumbai, there's not much space for everyone, so we're very close to each other, even like on a bus or on a train, uh, and also in some ways it's some people. So I think some travelers are not comfortable with that, and you have and let's say actually, there was somebody there was a lady in her 60s, and she was carrying I took her shopping, and she was carrying lots of bags. And then I just, like, as in our culture, we would obviously, like I think in most cultures, really, you would go up to them and ask them, like, can I help you with your bags? And she said something I just couldn't believe. She was like, why? Do you want to look like you've been shopping as well? And I was like, I don't think it's about culture as well. I think it's just also people sometimes are not culturally insensitive, they're just insensitive. So whether I was Japanese and she was in Japan, or whether I was in France and I was French, I think that's such an important thing, that there are just people, and some people are sensitive and culturally sensitive, and then there are just people who are insensitive and totally
Hmm.
insensitive to anything,
Hmm. They
really.
both go pretty hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big part of the reason I spent a long part of my life having to deal with my own cultural insensitivity, because a lot of how my family lives is so different than what I've been taught is right in the US, for example. And so it has taken a lot of taking off my shoes and stepping in the shoes of my family to be like, whoa, I understand now why you think the way you think, as opposed to being like, oh, but from my worldview and my lens, what you think is ridiculous. To actually step into their shoes and be like, okay, in the context that you're in, why you think what you think makes complete sense. And therefore, it's actually no more ridiculous than what I think, because everything that I think about the world is only because I'm looking at it in one particular way. To be like, I think the nuclear family is good, or I think whatever, whatever the list of things that I've thought are great ways to lead your life, or eating with the spoon is better than eating with your hands. Like, once I've ate with my hands for long enough and understood the personal connection I feel with my food, all of a sudden, then I'm like, okay, I actually understand this as well. But I also understand the value of eating with a spoon. So it's just that I think what you said earlier is so profound, of just, I've difference does not, you don't have to view difference as what's better. You can just be like, that's different. What can I learn from it? Right. And that, I think, is the most profound statement someone can tell themselves when they travel. Instead of being like, what's better, what's worse, how is my life so much greater or worse, just simply just be like, what can I learn from difference?
Absolutely, absolutely love them.
Is there something you try to do to maybe remind people about that as you travel with them, if perhaps they're being, are there things that you try to, or perhaps do for yourself?
I think one thing that really works is humor. So I try to just lighten up, lighten it up, lighten up the conversation. And then, like you said, like try to change their perspective on something. And even my own perspective. Um, so of course we're all human and we make opinions and um, but I think not having anything solid in stone. So, everything is fluid and everyone's beliefs are different and um, but there's one thing that's the same is that we're all different, like you said. So
Mm,
there are all that's the similarity that we all have different ways of eating and we all eat different things and we all enjoy. It's from person to person. All our tastes are different. We might be in the same family, but we have different, styles or different ways of uh, living. And that's okay because actually that means we're actually all the same. Really.
mm,
And it's really weird, but you meet people from like I know like some other country, and like I've met people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's so strange, but we're so similar in so many
mm,
ways. And you've been brought up in a totally different place. It's a totally different, culture and everything, and yet we can be so similar. So um, there are people all over who are different, and there are people all over the world who you could be like, I feel like I've known you forever, and we're so, you know, so much the same.
mm. Yeah, I mean, we're talking to each other, thousands of miles away from
Yeah,
each other, and
yeah,
it is quite. I mean, it's interesting because I feel like the basic needs are all the same. I mean, everyone wants to feel connected. Everyone wants to feel fed. Everyone wants to reproduce. I mean, these things are so common everywhere. It's just how we go about it can sometimes differ from each other. But in
yeah,
principle, the base is the exact same, which is why I feel like if you can connect with people on that level, which is what you actually said in the very beginning, where it's like, learn about why they're traveling. And I think if you can get to that level, why do people like what is the narrative people are telling themselves to do what they do? Once you can get to that level, you can see the same humanity in everyone. And I think it's very connected to what you were saying earlier. Like once you can get that story, what is the story that that person is telling themselves as they travel? Then you can understand them as a person. And that I think everyone has a narrative running in their head, who they are, what is their relationship to those around them. I mean, everyone has this really beautiful concocted narrative that they're following. And I think trying to understand that can connect you with anybody on the planet. There's no difference between you and another person.
absolutely. I think, yeah, only those people who are, I think the only thing we shouldn't be is fanatically anything and not be able to feel that way with someone else. So we have had, I've had this one guest who stayed with us who was let's say he was a fanatic a religious person. I won't mention which religion, but it just felt like like everything was an argument and there was nothing more to him. Like, so he couldn't see past that. And I felt like, you're the one losing out because there's so much here that we can talk about, which we can, we're both eating with our hands. We'll both eat the same thing that we, like. We're both eating dal and chawal, dal and rice. And, this so, and you're looking out the window and you're enjoying that view. And so am I looking out the same window and enjoying. But you're looking at this one thing that we cannot agree on. And you're being like totally, hard-headed about it and close-minded. And yeah, I was like, how sad, because then you're just not enjoying all the things that we have in common. It's focusing on that one difference,
100%.
Yeah, and blowing that, like if you focus on that difference, then it's like to be
Hmm.
honest.
Then you can get lost in
Yeah.
it. You can get lost in how different
Yeah.
you these small differences.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. This is more of a drama question. But if you had to
Okay.
say the country where you feel like people are the most sensitive versus a country where people are least sensitive, what would you say?
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
Most sensitive. Okay, I would say Japanese people are very respectful, no
Hmm.
matter what. At least that's the experience that I've had. And yet, their culture to Indians is so different to Indian culture.
Hmm. How so?
Like I mean, they're not immediately loud. Like Indians are so immediately loud. Like
Yeah.
like and even on the greeting, you're all immediately greeted with noise, and then Japanese are the opposite. So it's quiet
Hmm.
and the whole, yeah, I think, okay, yes, we both kind of we sit down on the ground, have tea. They have a lot of the tea as well, but they're just, yeah, I think I really admire Japanese people for that. Or the Japanese people who I've met. Never ever have I ever felt that they have, even though we're so different, are they ever kind of looking at us in any critical way,
Hmm.
positive or negative. And the opposite of them, unfortunately, I would have to say, I've had with Dutch people.
Hmm.
But maybe that's just because I work a lot with Dutch people. So I work mostly with actually a Dutch traveler. So maybe I've had more of them to be more judgmental of them. But they can be very, very uh, insensitive and ask awkward questions. And when I asked them, when I spoke to somebody about it, they said, "Oh no, but we're very direct. We're the opposite of Japanese." Yeah, but I said that's not direct. That's just rude. Like,
Hmm.
asking really, really personal questions. Like, if you're like, so let's say we in India, like we're so friendly, so we are talking with somebody and smiling and making a joke. It's a guy who works in a flower market, and I go there all the time because I'm taking tours there all the time, and I see him, and and we're having a joke, and then they'll say, "That's your boyfriend," and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. That's for me. That's really strange. So are you interested in the flower market? To know, or are you interested in, uh, yeah, what I'm doing with my personal life? It's very weird. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's so cool to hear you share these stories because I'm like, it's a very unique way of learning about the world. They all come to you. It's like, it's not like I don't know, have you been to Japan?
I've been there a long, long time.
Oh,
Past really
cool.
there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Very cool. So
it's
you've
like,
also been to many places as well. That's so cool.
yeah.
Yeah, you're quite a worldly person. It's refreshing. I don't hear many people with such a large understanding of what the world is like. It's hard. I definitely don't have it. I don't have any idea what Japan is like or what Japanese people are like. And I think traveling through India was the first time where I got 1% of a better understanding of what that country is like. And I'm Indian. And so it's like, man, I mean, I'm really excited. That was like my stepping stone. And now I'm excited to dive into a culture that I know nothing about and to see, how challenging and hard it can be there. And I
So
mean,
you want to travel you're planning to travel to new places?
yeah, I mean, definitely. I definitely want to keep traveling and working with education and understanding from a larger and larger perspective, because that's the only way you can build, I think, a more kind of nuanced take of the world. I think so long as you're only presented the lens that your country offers you, you will always be limited. You can't, I don't know what type of thoughts you can come up with. Like, I mean, you're just so limited. You're going to just regurgitate what you've already seen. But if you're able to experience 10 different cultures, not many other people have done that. In the history of the world, I mean, traveling is easiest now, right? I mean, traveling through India, even in remote places, was easy for me. That would have been virtually impossible a few decades ago. I mean, now with Uber and the phone, and you can map yourself everywhere and you can call people. I mean, you could not have done that 30, 40, 50 years ago. It would have been way harder to travel. So the benefit of living now, I think, is you can be an idea maker and an intellectual simply just from traveling a lot. You don't need to be a genius. You just have to see more of the world than other people, and then you'll have ideas just from that. And that's enough for you to build a career, build all of these things just because you have perspective that most people don't. It's, I think, a really easy hack to being a very useful person on this planet. Like, just travel for a bit and like really, and travel sensitively, like actually learn.
Yes.
Don't just judge. Don't just go to places and say this place sucks, that place sucks, I don't like that, but learn from each different place. Then I think traveling is I think by far one of the most powerful, useful things you can do.
Enriching.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much.
I definitely agree with you.
Yeah.
And like you said, just one more thing. I think traveling, it's not, you shouldn't just see it for you. You should see it for all those people. You're actually doing something for all those people who you're meeting in that country, who maybe cannot travel, and they're traveling just by meeting you, meeting all the other. Yeah. And that's what we do, because when we're not traveling, we're at home, but we're meeting all these people coming into our home. It's really like another form of traveling.
Wow. Yeah. I've never thought about it from that side of it either.
Yeah, I'm traveling all the time. From Japan to...
Who's been the latest? Who comes most often to your place? From where?
I think Europeans. I think British people. I think there are a lot of British people who come. Because they love butter chicken. So
it's their national dish. I just learned about that.
Is it? I thought khichdi is the national dish.
No, they have two national dishes, and one of them is butter chicken.
Oh. Okay.
Which is so fun. I had no idea. But yeah, well, I'm really excited.
Butter chicken.
I'm really excited. I mean, I feel like even this conversation's, it rekindled the sense of fascination for the world that I feel like it's non-existent. Like in the environments and communities that I'm in, a love for the world is non-existent. I just see traveling as a means of like, I want to post pictures that I'm wealthy and rich and I was able to go to other places on vacation for 1 week. But this idea of traveling to immerse yourself fully in a culture and lose yourself in it is almost non-existent. And so I've lost, even though I was there for so long, after coming back, I lost it. And I feel like talking to you has inspired that again with me. I'm like, the world is amazing. There's so much to see and so many people to meet.
Yeah, that's so true. Thanks, Gautam. Actually, speaking to you as well has reminded me of how special it is. And it's so nice to just see you again. And that's great, because it's like we say in the Airbnb tagline, it's one less stranger. It's one more friend. It's one less stranger. I know so much about you now. That's the nice thing.
Yeah, it is. It's such a small but beautiful thing that you can like create these connections, meaningful connections with people from all over the world. Like even if you were never to talk to someone again, the fact that it existed at some point and that there was that meaning, and it makes everything beautiful. It makes all of life just seem like it's worth it.
Yes. So let's talk more often then.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. But I want to say thank you so much for sharing everything. I think you have such a refreshing perspective on the world, and I'm really glad you shared it with us.
Thanks, Gautam. Thank you. I think you do too. That's why you're doing this podcast. So that's amazing.
Yeah. And for all of you listening, thank you so much for your time and patience. And that brings us to the end of our conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you again for listening and making this process so much more enjoyable. If you haven't had the chance to already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts to get the latest updates on new episodes. If you've been learning useful information here, feel free to leave a review as well. A little bit goes a long way in spreading this podcast. and have a wonderful day. And as per usual, stay re-educated.